This is for the mayor. The $58 million in federal funding is the top amount available and does not reflect what the city will actually get, correct?
It's up to $58.5 million. $58.5 million.
It is.
Yes.
That's a certainty.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know what the confusion is. The federal government has said that they're providing us a quarter of the cost, $58.5 million. If you don't believe me, talk to a member of parliament. That's what it is.
This is to Mr. Holmes. Now, this is kind of a very focused sort of subject here. I'm not sure if we can get into it, but we'll see. The question is, will you provide your opinion regarding the removal of wastewater from the hydraulic cycle to be used for potash mining, potentially by Western Potash? Would this be an appropriate use of wastewater?
I don't know. I have spent the last almost 6 months trying to wrap my head around this project till my head hurts and then my tummy hurts trying to explain it to people. I just don't know. I think it's a serious question. Water is scarce. It comes off those glaciers. It's getting scarcer. I think we do need to have a serious debate about how we deal with water and what other uses we divert it to. But no, I'm not in any position to comment on that.
Actually, we have thank you. We have a question to the mayor that's very similar. It's what impact from selling wastewater to the potash mines? Is it on the table?
We have an agreement in principle with Western Potash to sell wastewater, treated wastewater. The Ministry of Environment by the province has approved that. The impact downstream is positive, but there is no agreement yet. And through that agreement, if it takes place, the revenue to the city is about $30 million over, I'm not sure the number of years, but quite a number of years. So this has met all the provincial environmental standards. It's a matter of public record and debate at City Council over the last 3 years, and no one's complained about that being an issue whatsoever. In fact, some of the pollutants that are in the wastewater are causing difficulties downstream, and that is removed. Now, I'm not an environmentalist, but I know that the Ministry of Environment said this was a good idea in terms of its impact on the environment. But there is no deal yet. It's a deal in principle.
Okay, thank you. This is to both our debaters. So maybe to Mr. Holmes first. Who controls the hiring of new employees in a P3?
The private corporation will. Any new employees who are hired will be hired by the corporation. Any employees who are laid off, and that often happens in P3s, will be done by the private corporation. But we don't know what's going to happen after that, but clearly they will become employees of that company.
Mayor?
Well, I don't, for 1 minute, accept the fact that people are laid off, because I indicated before in the provincial law, succession rights, those employees retain the same collective agreement. They have the same bargaining unit, the same union. They're fully protected. So this misinformation is unfair, and again, is part of this issue of fear, not facts, of clouding the issue to make people be concerned, unwarranted, and unnecessary. There is no law that would allow for a company to lay people off because they moved into a private company from the city of Regina. Those employees are fully protected by law, and if they choose to remain with the city of Regina, they have employment with the city of Regina. That's the law.
Okay, thank you. This is to the mayor. If the Deloitte business case for the P3 is so convincing, why doesn't the city of Regina release a completely unredacted version of this report before the referendum?
Good question. I'll answer it this way. Virtually all the information is available in the Deloitte report, but what is not available, and is not available not just for a P3, it'd be the same for the project on the ballot, it's design, bid, build. This is information that would compromise a fair and reasonable tender process where one person has advantage over another. Now, I want to make it clear, give you an analogy to make this clear, and Mr. Holmes would understand this. When he's with CUPE negotiating labor agreements, he would not put all his cards on the table to say, here's my best deal, take it or leave it. He protects the interests of his people he represents. The City of Regina is protecting the interests of taxpayers and is not going to show information that would provide one bidder an advantage over another. That way, we're protecting the interests of taxpayers so they're not paying more. I'll make no apologies for this because governments around Canada don't do this. They do not provide that information. And it's a very narrow band of information. And it's being looked upon as some kind of evil thing happening here. It's very much a common practice of governments to withhold that information so that they have a fair bidding process. It's about getting a fair process, the fair deal. So when you're playing, you're putting your cards on the table, you don't put them there all at once and you don't say, here's my best deal, because then they got you. That's not fair to taxpayers. We do the same for design bid build. If the referendum goes for design bid build, that information will not be available because it will compromise the integrity of the RFP process and give one or more companies an advantage over others. And that's not what this is about. It's protecting taxpayers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've only got, by my calculation, 1 minute before we have to go to closing statements, 3 minutes each. And I think I have a question here that can be answered fairly succinctly in less than a minute, and it goes to both of you. Is there something that the two of you can agree on? Mr. Holmes?
Yes, I mean, we agree that we need a new wastewater treatment plant. There's no question about that. We agree with the mayor that the employees and their collective agreement will go to the new private corporation. There'll be employees of that corporation, but the contract will go with them. There's no question about that either. I think we agree, I mean, we don't agree, that the City of Regina has a lower borrowing rate than any private corporation. Anyway, those would be the things I think we agree on, and that's sort of the starting point for this debate.
I think that we can agree that the interest rate spread, given that CUPE has already said that it's virtually zero, in the report I have here that was tabled to council, that the interest rate spread is virtually zero between public and private. We can agree on that, even though you may say otherwise.
Well, just before we leave that, I don't. Okay.
We have to go to closing. We have to go to closing statements. So we're going to give the mayor and Mr. Holmes each an opportunity for some final comments, 3 minutes each, and then I'll have a few closing remarks of my own. But and we're going to go in the opposite order that we began. So Mayor Fougere, you're first with 3 minutes of closing comments.
Thank you very much, and for a good, enlightening debate. I have a couple of comments to make in my closing remarks. I talked about we talk about facts and not fear. I mean that sincerely. I want to go back to the advertising that the general public sees here. And one I don't have that links us to water is a CUPE ad that shows a girl with a glass of water to her lips. We're talking about continually saying, well, I agree that we own it, but we don't really own it. All these misstatements and half statements are confusing to the general public. And I regret that. That's regrettable that we can't have a discussion about this. Either we own it or we don't. We own it. I regret that we don't have information on the cost of advertising by Water Watch and the partners, the Council of Canadians and CUPE. That would be nice to know what that is, to be fair and open and transparent. That's not there. I talk about the design bid build in a fixed price contract is an admission, without really saying so, that perhaps the design bid build model on the ballot doesn't work, that there are problems with it, that the costs are not contained, and they are not contained. City Council's focus has always been on providing greater service and stretching your tax dollars, and I make no apologies for that. My council colleagues worked very hard to do that for you. We have analyzed, 11 have to analyze this with our staff and with our consultants. We all believe this and know this, are very confident that a public-private partnership in this project alone, not as a tool to be used all the time, in this project alone, is overwhelmingly positive to contain the cost to hold the builder accountable for cost overruns, to continue to have it operated and maintained in a way that is effective and will hold us, give us a facility at the end of 30 years that will be fully maintained and operational. It will save an additional $20 million. I make no apologies for going over to the $58.5 million. That's incredibly important for us to reduce the tax burden on you. To me, this is so self-evident. If we get away from the rhetoric and the fear that's being spread on this one, and get to the point of the matter, I think it's quite clear. Vote no against this project of design, bid, build. Contain the cost, allow council to stretch your tax dollars, provide you better quality service over the course of life of that facility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Mr. Holmes, your closing comments?
Yes, so let's talk about a couple. Well, let's start with the design, bid, build. That definition, the design, bid, build, is often fixed price. It's not mine. It's PPP Canada's and the Canadian Council for Public-Private Partnerships. And I promise the mayor that if the vote is for a design, bid, build, traditional tendering, we will not take up a petition to stop it from being fixed contract or fixed price.
Can we be quoted on that?
You can be quoted on that. I can be quoted on that. That is the logical way to go. It's not always. Fixed price is not free. Obviously, the contractor wants to be paid for taking on that risk. But we need this now by the end of 2016, and I think that would be a prudent step. It makes sense to us. It's an option, design, bid, build. Some lawyer in the crowd just told us it was very common. That's the way to go. And the question does not limit the city in that way. That's not a violation of that process. I want to talk a little bit about bidding. We talk about building this plant, but the key thing is there will be competition to build this plant. There will be more in the design, bid, build because more firms are able to compete for that work. And that's what the British say too, right? That there's more competition because the P3 requires a very large company to do that, okay? But when that's done, then you know what those costs are. You've got a fixed price contract. You know what you're going to pay for it. Okay, that's done. The difference with the P3 is you don't know what you're going to pay out over those 30 years. Okay? There are going to have to be adjustments made to that wastewater treatment plant in any model. Okay? There is likely to be less water coming through Saskatchewan to flush things out, and there are likely to be higher standards in terms of what can be left in that system over the next 30 years. I certainly hope there are. I hope we'd be improving on that. And those things are going to cost money, and those are going to be negotiated. And you're going to be negotiating with someone who's got a contract, an ironclad contract to run that plant, and they're going to want to be paid for those additional services. And he talked about my negotiating history. The one thing you don't want to get stuck in is a situation of going into bargaining where you have no bargaining power. Right? And that's what this seems to be a model for. Okay? The question of the employees, whether they can be laid off or not, the law doesn't guarantee any employee in Saskatchewan the right not to be laid off. And as far as I know, the CUPE contract, I'd never seen a CUPE contract that guaranteed people they wouldn't be laid off. These employees are being laid off by the city and then rehired, transferred over to the private contractor. They have some reversion right. That's great. The city did a good job of looking after them. I'm sure the union put some pressure on them to get the best deal they could for them. But when they're gone, that company will have the right to lay off. How can you run a business if you don't have a right to adjust your workforce? And one of the things that P3 companies have often done, although we don't know what will happen in this situation, is they've often cut staff. And sometimes they've cut staff so far the service has been prejudiced.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. All right, well, listen, folks. On behalf of the Johnson Shoyama School, I want to thank you, first of all, for coming out tonight. It's been a great turnout, first of all, in inclement weather. And there's something kind of invigorating about it when you see, public engagement like this on an issue. It's healthy for the community, for people to get involved, and for the opportunity for this issue to get addressed the way it has been tonight. It's a complex issue and strong feelings on both sides, and hopefully you feel that you've learned a little bit tonight. I think both the mayor and Mr. Holmes did tremendous jobs in terms of telling us their side of the story. So before let's give them a round of applause and thank you very much.